Almost all the data points are in at this point, ladies and gentlemen. We can go through and we can look at these updated projections. Y'all know, pulling these from Underdog, I mean, this is going to be the best place that you can go for them because you can go through and you take the more than less than. If you think these are garbage projections, then hell, go take the lower than if you don't think Dameon Pierce getting to 63.5 total yards. If you think, oh my gosh, Mason, yeah, these projections are garbage. Desmond Ritter's easily going to have 200 passing yards. Then go take the higher than an Underdog can lose a lot of money, but I'll tell you what, Underdog's not putting these out there because they're stupid. They know what they are doing, and they are very valuable data points for us to use to submit our starting lineups this week. Starting off with Atlanta, you're not starting Desmond Ridder. Bijan Robinson still listed off as a must-start running back. I mean, this is a player that his projected pick'em is at 96.5 total yards. You're not starting Tyler Algier, someone that really doesn't have any involvement as a receiver. Just a premium handcuff back if you were to see an injury to Bijan. Drake London, not startable, only at 44.5 receiving yards. You'll see later on that you have Tank Dell actually a little bit higher than this, and I still like Tank Dell a little more. Now, Kyle Pitts at 3 receptions, 32.5 receiving yards. If you compare him to the other tight ends with projections right now, Kyle Pitts actually not going to be the worst play in the world. Still completely fine playing Kyle Pitts at tight end. He's currently actually tied for the team lead in terms of targets in Atlanta. And going over to Jacksonville, you have Trevor Lawrence, 239.5 passing yards, about 257.5 total yards. I still think that Lawrence is a quarterback that we can expect a bounce back from. You have ETN at about 91.5 total yards. I'm starting all these guys. Calvin Ridley, 64.5 yards, start him. Christian Kirk, 52.5 receiving yards, start him as well now that you have no Zay Jones. Fire up Evan Ingram, and you'll see later on, I mean, you can compare this baseline of what you have with Christian Kirk with some of those other questions that you'll have. Now, Lamar Jackson is a quarterback that they have for slightly over 19 fantasy points based off of rushing volume. You still start him. Zay Flowers only had 51.5 receiving yards. You compare that to Christian Kirk, maybe get a little scared. This is a very, very tough matchup for Zay Flowers going up against Cleveland, however. I mean, if you look at the fact that you have no Rashad Bateman, that you have no Odell Beckham Jr., I mean, I think that you can be pretty excited about starting Zay Flowers in terms of the volume that he'll have. The fundamental issue, of course, is going to be the matchup that you are looking at. But, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a tough spot to go through and fade him just because you have nobody else in this offense. Andrews must start tight end. I mean, what's actually funny is you have Evan Ingram about the same range as Mark Andrews, at least for this week. But let's go through, slide this down. Gus Edwards, you're not starting any of these secondary Baltimore wide receivers. You can skip past that real quick. Skip past Cleveland. We just don't know right now if you're looking at Deshaun Watson and his shoulder injury. And as we get to Miami, it's going to be the most exciting game of the week, where you have Tua at 18.9 fantasy points. So slightly less than what you have with Lamar Jackson. Keep in mind, that's because Lamar is primarily fueled off of rushing. You have Raheem Mostert at about 70 total yards. With Raheem Mostert, will be a must-start running back, despite this being a tough matchup. Devon Achane at 48.5 total yards. Kind of shows us that you do you. I mean, if you really wanted to start him, you can. I'm going to have a hard time telling people to bench the man just because he dropped 50 points last week in pretty much his first NFL game. So it's really up to you in what you're wanting to do here. But with the Tyreek Hill side of things, he does play Tyreek Hill. He's at 90.5 total yards. Jalen Waddle is going to be a must-start player as well. Should be a very high-scoring contest. And I actually don't mind going with the more than 9.5 fantasy points for Jalen Waddle against the Buffalo Bills here. Now that Waddle is officially cleared, this is going to be one of my favorite pick'ems of the week. There are some other ones, such as like the Tank Dell one, which y'all really like later on. But of course, if you want to go check out any of these pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the live chat, in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $500. Plus, you're going to be getting our updated rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and the Patrick Mahomes special pick'em for tomorrow night, more than less than half a total yard against the New York Jets. So make sure you take advantage of that. Only going to get all that with promo code FLOCK. But moving down, we can skip past everybody else in Miami. Nobody else is interesting here. You have Josh Allen at about 20.8 fantasy points. Obviously, Josh Allen will be someone that you're playing. You have James Cook at 81.5 total yards. James Cook's a must-start back. You have Stephon Diggs, 82.5 receiving yards, must-start wide receiver. Gabe Davis is someone that's very difficult to go through and ever recommend for someone to start or sit, because it's a very binary range of outcomes with Gabe Davis, right? He either crushes or he does absolutely nothing. If you're looking for a high ceiling, Gabe Davis is your guy, but I mean, you are looking at the same time, wide receiver with an extremely low floor. You have Kincaid, Dawson Knox, guys that are splitting this tight end room at the moment, probably not starting either. Going over to Cincinnati, you have Joe Burrow no longer on the injury report. You have Burrow at 264.5 passing yards. If you are still concerned about the calf strain, I'm not going to fault you if you want to go take the fewer than. You have Mixon at about 77.5 total yards. You have Jamar Chase at 82.5 receiving yards. You have T. Higgins almost at 11 fantasy points. Obviously, Higgins bad last week on Monday night, but ultimately has a great matchup against Tennessee here. And then skipping past this, we don't really care about any of these guys. This will be another pick'em that I really like. So Ryan Tannehill only at 13 fantasy points, going to be a horrendous Titans offense, of course. But looking at Derrick Henry, this is a game where Cincinnati currently is favored. And what we've seen in the past is if Tennessee falls behind, what you may end up seeing is you may see this team kind of abandon the run, actually look to get more Tajay Spears involved and less Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry for fewer than 84.5 total yards in this matchup against Tennessee will be something that I am interested in, just to see if you have Tajay Spears expanding his role. And then you have DeAndre Hopkins, obviously with no Treylon Burks. He is startable as like a wide receiver 3. It really depends on your roster and your format. Going over to Washington, Sam Howell, super tough matchup. Really, the only guy that you would consider starting would be Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson down at 61.5 total yards. I mean, he has the consistent volume. The fundamental issue is it's just that horrendous matchup going up against the Philadelphia Eagles where it's hard to get excited about anybody here. You have John Dotson kind of as a cuttable player at this point, only at 39.5 receiving yards. Going over to Philly, I don't know if we would have spent much time on this. You start Jalen Hurts, duh. You start DeAndre Swift, duh. DeAndre Swift is right now at 76.5 total yards. Kenneth Gainwell, not startable. Devonta Smith, fire him up. A.J. Brown, fire him up. I mean, we kind of know all of this by now. But going over to what we have on the Minnesota Vikings, this is going to be another pick'em that I actually don't mind looking at whatsoever, where they have Alexander Mattison kind of ranked right now as a must-start running back with 75.5 total yards, where I'm looking at this going, okay, well, we know Minnesota's looking to throw the ball over and over and over again. There's not much rushing volume in this offense to go around in the first place. Plus, you bring in Cam Akers, where now this is potentially a split backfield. I don't mind going with the fewer than 75.5 total yards when it comes to Alexander Mattison. Jefferson's going to crush. I actually was strongly considering Jordan Addison for more than 40.5 receiving yards as well. I think that is very interesting. The thing is, I think maybe you would prefer it to be a spot where this is going to be a game where they have to go out there and they have to air the ball out. Where against Carolina, you don't necessarily know if that'll be the case. They have Miles Sanders at about 12 fantasy points. Miles Sanders looks like he most likely will play. You have Adam Thielen at about 50 receiving yards, but honestly, you just don't know if the passing volume is going to maintain that same level over in Carolina. Now with Baker, I mean, it's an okay, whatever matchup against New Orleans. Probably don't like it. He's only at 14 fantasy points. You have Rachaad White as a must-start running back, however, sitting at 11.5. Keep in mind, this is going to be for a half PPR format. You have Evans only at 4.5 receptions. We actually took the more than 4 receptions on Mike Evans last week on Underdog. Won some money there. You have Chris Godwin at 53.5 receiving yards. So I do want to just point out that if you look at Evans in comparison to these guys like Olave, A.J. Brown, I know Evans has crushed as of late, but please don't convince yourself that Mike Evans is in that range of players just yet. Going over to New Orleans, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be, so it's hard to look at these too much. You have Kamara currently for 53.5 rushing yards. Does seem a little bit rich for the rushing side of things. Keep in mind, Kamara will still be a must-start guy just based off his receiving volume. And then I don't think the quarterback play will impact Michael Thomas or Olave too much. Going over to Los Angeles, Kyron Williams, one of the highest pick'ems this week at 86.5 total yards. A must-start running back. In terms of the wide receivers, you have Tutu Atwell at 50.5 receiving yards. I mean, you have Tyler Higbee, someone that may not even play right now, 36.5. And the Puka Nacua at 73.5 receiving yards. We won some money taking the higher than on Puka's receiving yardage last week. This week seems like a little bit of a tougher spot. Now, Anthony Richardson, 261.5 total yards. Obviously, you start Richardson, borderline top 5 quarterback based off rushing upside. Zach Moss must start running back as well. If you just look at the amount of volume that he's seeing in Indy, very similar to Kyron Williams. Michael Pittman Jr. must start wide receiver. Nobody else here is interesting. Going over to Denver, I mean, Russ going to be bad. Javonte projects for 70.5 total yards. P. Ryan only at 40. I mean, so you are looking at this being most likely Javante's backfield. Sutton, Judy, I actually wouldn't mind the more than on Judy receiving yards here. I think Judy is the wide receiver one over Cortland Sutton as he gets further removed from this hamstring injury at this moment. You go over to Chicago. I mean, with Chicago, you have Justin Fields at 250.5 total yards. Clearly, Justin Fields has been horrendous. This Chicago Bears offense has been horrendous. But this is a Denver defense that just let up 70 points. If Justin Fields was ever going to get it done, it would be this week. He would have no excuses. You have DJ Moore at 3.5 receptions. I wouldn't even mind going with the more than 3.5 receptions for DJ Moore, just given the fact that this offense may be completely over it. Now, another pick'em that I don't mind at all will be the Najee Harris for fewer than 69.5 total yards. I mean, with Najee, obviously, it's a pretty good matchup going up against the Houston Texans, but they have Jaylen Warren currently at 56.5 total yards. And if you look at how they split this backfield last week, they did split this pretty much straight down the middle, 50-50 between Warren and Najee Harris. And Najee Harris, I believe, has had 2 receiving yards all season now, where Najee really is just losing his role completely as a pass catcher in this offense. So even if the matchup is there, I probably would look to go through and take the fewer than on Najee Harris. As CJ Stroud, there's a lot of passing volume in this offense. It's going to be another spot where I actually don't mind at all going with a Tank Dell more than 3.5 receptions. If you look at the volume in Houston, this has been a team that's been airing it out. You look at what we've seen from defenses against Pittsburgh so far this season. They've really had to go through, and they've really had to go through the air where it's hard to run against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So going with the more than 3.5 receptions for Tank Dell, I think will be very interesting. And also going back to Dameon Pierce, if you include the Dameon Pierce 63.5 total yards in your special pick'em this weekend, maybe it's changed for today, but regardless, you can just see it at the very top of the screen. So include the 100K Sunday. If you include a player in that, you get entered in to win. Underdog's going to give away $10,000 to 10 separate people every single Sunday. We've actually had a few members of the flock winning $10,000 over the past few weeks, which is freaking awesome. So please make sure you include that in your pick'em slip. That way we can keep on saying that we've had members of the flock winning the $10,000 going forward. But going on beyond this, going to Las Vegas, I mean, hard to say too much. We don't know what the quarterback play is going to be here, so we don't really have much that we can look at. Going over to Los Angeles, you have Keenan Allen, top 5 wide receiver, No Mike Williams, no Austin Eckler, going to get a considerable amount of volume. You have Quentin Johnson at 28.5 receiving yards. Johnson, we like the long-term upside with, just definitely can't play him right now. You have Palmer at 44.5 receiving yards. I just kind of want to see what this offense looks like with no Mike Williams. And I've learned this the hard way, ladies and gentlemen, but Joshua Kelly ain't scoring a touchdown, all right? I mean, I've seen Joshua Kelly play. He's been in our starting lineup. And this is someone that to have projected for half a touchdown. Take the fewer than on half a touchdown for Joshua Kelly. I mean, even if it's a great spot, even if it's a great matchup, even if it's great offense, we've learned the hard way to avoid that. We start nobody in Arizona, maybe outside of what you have with James Conner. Obviously, in San Fran, you're starting Ayuk, you're starting CMC, you're starting George Kittle. Really, the only guy that you'd be interested in is Deebo Samuel plays or not. We will get more information on that soon. If Deebo does play, you start Deebo Samuel. Going over to New England, Ramondre Stevenson's a running back that I've seen a lot of people wanting to bench. It's a revenge game for Zeke, and it's a tough matchup. But Ramondre is still at 76.5 total yards. He's still projected as like a top 12, top 15 running back when it comes to usage. You still have to play Ramondre Stevenson, especially if you're in a full PPR format. Going over to Dallas, I mean, Tony Pollard currently is sitting at about 95 total yards. He looks like a top 3 running back at this point. He's right in line with Bijan Robinson. I wish I had way more Tony Pollard at this point. And then CeeDee Lamb, on second thought, I actually would prefer the more than 66.5 receiving yards instead of the more than 5.5 receptions when it comes to CeeDee Lamb on Underdog. But regardless, I think that Lamb is in line for a bounce back. I know the volume was down a little bit last week, but if you take a step back and see what we've had over and over again, Mahomes, obviously, I think he gets a total yard this week, and I don't think too many people are going to disagree with that. I don't mind the Isaiah Pacheco for fewer than 69.5 total yards as well. Just seeing how they've deployed their running backs so far this season. I understand that all the running backs got there this past week because they just had a massive lead over the Chicago Bears, and it wasn't even a game. You could possibly make an argument that's going to be the case against the Jets again. If you go over and look at what you have on the Jets side of things, you have Zach Wilson for 190 total yards. You have Breece Hall for 63.5 total yards. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to take the fewer than 63.5 total yards for Breece Hall as they split this backfield 3 ways. And obviously it's going to be a game where they trail massively, but really not starting anybody with the Jets unless it's a full PPR format and you want to throw Garrett Wilson in there as a wide receiver 3. But you start Lockett, you start Metcalf, you start Walker. Not too much to discuss. It looks like Metcalf will be good to go. But I think that's a quick little brief overview of all the games here, ladies and gentlemen. So, I mean, we will continue to update you as we get injury updates over the next few days. And after we end this live stream, if you want to, please drop any questions you have in the comment section. I'll be happy to go through and answer as many as I can now. I'll be live later tonight and live tomorrow morning as well to specifically answer all your questions. So just make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. And of course, if you want to check out any of these Pickems over on Underdog Fantasy, if you want to get entered to win that $10,000 this Sunday, or if you want to go get the Patrick Mahomes special Pick'em more than less than half a total yard, or if you want to get our rest of season fantasy football rankings or tiers, or if you want to get a 100% deposit match up to $500 or all of the above, you can find the link in the live chat in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK will get you a 100% deposit match up to $500. Plus, you'll get our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. You'll get the whole 9 yards. We've already gone through it. You're only getting all of it. Promo code FLOCK, though. But thank you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. And really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.